Welcome to Catholic Ed for All, your weekly insight into topics of special education in Catholic schools. My name is Dr. Raul Escarpio, and I invite you to join me each week as we learn how to be more inclusive in Catholic schools and continue to live out St. John Paul II's message of open wide the doors to Christ. Many thanks go out to RCL Benziger, who is generously sponsoring this podcast. RCL Benziger enriches the worldwide Catholic community by providing the most engaging and highest quality resources, programs, and services rooted in the rich and diverse tradition of the Catholic faith. And now, on to our show. On the show today, I am joined by Dr. Michelle Leah, Assistant Director for Professional Development at the Andrew M. Greeley Center for Catholic Education at Loyola University, Chicago. Why, hello, Michelle. Thank you. Welcome to the show, and thanks for being here.
Good morning, Raul. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure having you. So, can you please tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Right now, I am, as you said, Assistant Director for Professional Development. So I provide but mostly organize professional development for teachers in Catholic schools, mostly around Chicago, but we also are doing professional development in the Diocese of Charleston, the Diocese of Columbus, Indianapolis, and so on. And my previous life was that I was an elementary teacher in Catholic and public schools for children with regular developing children and also children with disabilities. And then I was also a reading specialist for 7 years. So I use that background to support me as I teach students at the undergraduate level. I just finished a course teaching 13 undergraduates who are planning to be teachers, and about half of them are planning to be special education teachers.
Fantastic. So I always ask my elementary teacher, since I was one, what grade did you teach when you were in elementary?
I taught second grade, and my first job, I had 40 second graders, so I always think of them fondly. Enrollment was robust, we'll say that. And then I taught fourth grade, and then when I was a reading specialist, it was for kindergarten through fifth graders.
Fantastic. I was a fourth and fifth grade teacher, and I always say I love them because they start understanding sarcasm at that age or whatever. And my joke, Michelle, is I always want to go back and apologize to my students that I had the very first year that I was teaching because I was a mess.
Oh,
I thought that I knew it all and I was doing this, and wow, if I look back now and say I'm so sorry that I did that to you.
amen.
So you're on that boat with me, right, Michelle?
Absolutely.
So you're at the Andrew M. Greeley Center in Chicago. Can you tell me about that center? And I know you told me what Mike has you doing there, but tell me about what the center does.
The center sort of has three arms or three priorities. So we focus on professional development, but then also Catholic school leadership. We have a local Catholic principal preparation program that's authentically Catholic, but also meets all of the Illinois state requirements. And we have made an adjustment to that program so that it can be offered online for anyone in the United States, and that will begin this summer. So it'll be a master's in Catholic school leadership without certification. So for those who are interested in that. We also have our other third arm is inclusive practices in Catholic schools. And so in addition to offering professional development and just support and consulting, because Mike Boyle is a guru of that, and Sandra Morton is as well, we also have a Leading Inclusive Catholic Schools online certificate, which is 4 courses. And we are starting a new certificate, instructional coaching certificate, that will also start in August. And that is also 4 courses, 3 of which lead into a master's in Catholic school leadership.
Fantastic. So all the Catholic school peeps that we know out there, and you're looking for some professional development, and you're looking for something to increase your knowledge base, well, there you go. I'm going to give the information on how to contact Michelle afterwards, and she's on Twitter, and they're on Twitter. So I'm sure they'd love to hear from you if you have any questions for them. So with that being said, I know that one of the main areas in your life is reading. You talked about how you were a reading specialist and all that. So let's talk reading, Michelle, for the next few minutes. Why is reading instruction so difficult? Forget the kids with exceptional needs. Why in general is it so hard?
I think it's hard because it is an internal process. So it's something that's happening in your head, in your brain. And in order to know how you're doing it, it's not like a soccer kick or a free throw. I can't see it. I can't see how you're shading in during art class, or I can't hear how you're singing. So it's honestly one of the reasons why assessment is such an important part of reading, because it's a window into seeing how a student is processing information, is comprehending, is decoding, how they're processing reading.
Okay. And how is that compounded now when the student has an exceptionality?
So then that means that that what we typically think of are the sort of typical processes. Then that students might be choosing a different path. So they may have a struggle with decoding and they're not able to do that as efficiently. Or, for example, students who have dyslexia or a reading disability, they have a very difficult time. It's tied very closely to memory. So they're not having an easy time of remembering their sight words or remembering that SH makes a sh sound. So then it requires a lot of patience, but a lot of repetition.
Yes, and since we're talking about students with disabilities, I mean, even if we're not talking about students with exceptionalities here, if you have, let's say you're 40, that you had a robust class, I'm sure all of them learn reading differently. So you have 40 different ways of learning reading, and then you have one teacher working with them on trying to meet their needs. Do you find that is common?
Absolutely. I think that there are, I don't think, I know that there are students who are whole word learners, so they're not using their decoding, and sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes it's a bad thing because it impacts their spelling and their writing. And there are other students who really need the building blocks of the decoding strategies to get to what we typically think of as sounding out words. So there are a lot of different ways to get to reading, both the decoding part for our new readers or our early readers, and then also for the comprehension part for all of our readers.
So when you say whole words, readers, they're the ones that can just look at a word, like a sight word. Is that what you're looking at? They can just look at a word and know what it is?
Yes, so it would be for both sight words and high frequency words. So if you ever have known a 3-year-old who can identify the word Tyrannosaurus Rex because
Right,
they
right,
read so many dinosaur books, those
right.
would be high frequency words that they just know by looking at them.
And we can also bring an environmental print into that because they can recognize a fast food chain or their favorite toy store or something like that. Agreed?
Absolutely, yes.
So when we are looking, and just for let's build a little bit of knowledge base in the next minute, can you distinguish? I know we're not going to go over the big five or the big six according to some people, but can you just distinguish or differentiate between phonemic awareness and phonological phonemic awareness and phonological skills?
Yes. So phonemic awareness is something that my professors used to say that you can do in the dark. You don't need to see the word, you only need to hear it. So phonemic awareness is being able to hear that the word cat starts with a k sound. It has a short A in the middle, and its ending or final sound is a t. It also is being able to rhyme, being able to omit and delete sounds. So if I have the word cat and I want to delete the first sound, then I'm left with at. So if you've ever used the Heggerty Phonemic Awareness Program, which I highly recommend for kindergarten, first, and second graders, and also for interventions for students with learning disabilities, the Heggerty program does all of that phonemic awareness. Phonics is when you're looking at a word and you're trying to figure out how to say the word, or you're thinking, I want to write the word happy birthday, the words happy birthday. I need to know what letter makes the sound. Do I need two P's? Sometimes Y makes an E sound. So the phonics, I need to have my eyes and ears and my pencil. And for phonemic awareness, I just need my ears.
Fantastic. Good differentiation there. And I learned a little bit right now, so thank you. Um, let's talk about some strategies, though, that can help with the big five. Listen, I know that if you have any type of reading need, even if you're not diagnosed as exceptional or with a learning need, comprehension is huge, Michelle. It's just so difficult because if you don't have comprehension, in my opinion, science is going to be difficult. Math word problems are going to be difficult. Reading and social studies, it's just difficult. Do we have some sound strategies that we can offer in comprehension for those listening right now?
Yes, so you've mentioned the big five a couple of times, and I think that that's a really important thing to remember. Whenever we're doing any kind of reading instruction, it should always be focused on vocabulary, phonics, phonemic awareness, fluency, and comprehension. And I like to think that those five things are kind of like a box of hangers, because I really can't do one without the other. And as
Nice.
you said, the most important of them all is comprehension. There's no reason to just read words if I'm not going to ingest them and understand them and own them and understand it. So, a couple of resources that I would recommend when it comes to this, Strategies That Work is a really helpful book that was written by Stephanie Harvey and Anne Goodvis. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing her name correctly. And that's in its third edition. And that is a really helpful resource, because it not only does some really helpful back work for teachers to learn how to teach strategically and how reading is thinking. But then it also talks about some strategies, like I think the most important one, honestly, is monitoring comprehension. I think that for students to be able to know that they, while they were reading the last paragraph, that they were actually thinking about soccer practice and not what was the content of the paragraph, that they
Mm-hmm.
stop, go back, reread if they need to. And along those lines, I also think that it's really important for teachers to think of how they personally read. I was working with a group of teachers, and I made that joke, like if you just read a paragraph and you were actually writing your grocery list in your head instead of understanding the paragraph. And this one teacher said, you're right. I never think to tell my students that, to tell them that I sometimes have to go back and reread because I was thinking of something else. So I think it's really important for teachers to do think aloud and to be really honest about their own reading lives that they have to monitor.
Excellent. What was the name of the book? I don't know if you said, if you mentioned it. You said the authors, but you didn't say the name of the book. Do you know it?
Yes, the name of the book is Strategies That Work.
Strategies at Work. Okay.
Yeah,
It's
and it's
fun.
in its
No, go ahead.
sorry, it's in its third edition. But if you have a copy of the first or second edition, those work just fine.
Okay, okay, that's good to know. I was laughing when you say you're reading something but you're thinking of another. That reminds me about when I'm saying my rosaries in the morning, like I'm in a Hail Mary, and then my brain wanders a little bit. I'm like, oh, got to go back and do that again. So that was
Yep.
funny. That happens to me. One thing that I think is crucial, in my opinion, you're my reading expert, but in my opinion, is students need to see their teachers read. So when the
Hmm.
students are reading, the teacher needs to stop everything and read with the students. We used to have an old thing when I was teaching called DEAR, drop everything and read, and or drop everything and write. And teachers need to model this behavior for their students, because if you're telling your students to just read independently, or just at their desk or whatever, and they don't see you reading, then I think it just loses itself in translation, the value of reading in the classroom. What is your opinion on that?
I agree. I think that some teachers will say that that's their opportunity to do reading conferences with students, and I'm
Right.
okay with that. I think as long as it's reading related. But if you're grading papers or checking Twitter, then that may be not the best modeling. So I agree. Yeah, when I was a fourth grade teacher, I had a drop everything and read time right after lunch, which was also a calming had a calming effect.
Right.
And I would have regularly I would have students come up and whisper, Miss Leah, can we extend deer time by 5 minutes? I'd be like, well, I guess so.
Oh my, if you're pulling my leg on it, or not my leg, if you're going to be so difficult, of course, of course. And then, Michelle, if even if it's not comprehension, other strategies, we have some teachers that are departmentalized. Like I know a lot of people that are math and science teachers, and the students are having and they're not really difficulties, and they're not really that reading teacher expert or whatever. Can we give some strategies for the content areas on helping students?
Yes, I think that one strategy that's really helpful is to sort of when you think of you have a nice book on a Saturday afternoon and you get cozy in a chair, you really get settle in with the book. And I think that students need to sort of settle in with the text that they're going to read. So they need to do some of those pre-reading strategies of what are we talking about? Are we talking about genetic mitosis? Then I need to know what my headings are, what my bold print words are. Are there any pictures or captions or graphs? And really get familiar, the lay of the land of what this text is going to be, so that they know what they're going to dive into. And then anytime that students can ask questions, so not just the teacher wants me to, to answer this DOK1, what is mitosis, but I want to be thinking like, wait, this reminds me of something? Is this like meiosis, or making those kinds of connections? That sort of leads to also activating and connecting to what they already know, because as humans, we like to connect what we know with the new. So that is very helpful for content area teachers as well.
And it's necessary to always set up the purposes for reading, and as long as we're talking about that really quick, are you a fan of graphic organizers and guided notes ahead of time for a text? Is that still relevant?
I'm a huge fan of graphic organizers. I think that the notes can be really helpful for some students. I think that they can be a hindrance to others. So that's an example of universal design, where I might
Yes.
offer it to all of my students depending on the age, and then they decide. Same thing for graphic organizers. Some students, it just doesn't help them, but others really need it. So they are both very helpful. Yeah.
Fantastic. So, as we're closing the show off, I want to ask you the question that I always ask, but in a different way. What should Catholic special education in reading look like? Or if you want, what should the Catholic special education classroom look like for reading?
One thing that I think is sometimes overlooked is, when it comes to reading, is how important free independent reading time is. So having time and access and choice is so important. So students who start reading a book in school are much more likely to take that book home and continue to read it, because what a body that is in motion stays in motion kind of idea. So I think that making sure that students have lots of options. If you don't have a school library, which many Chicago Catholic schools don't, then you need to have a robust classroom library, and or walk your students to the public library to get a library card. It's really important that students have the access to that. The other thing that I think is an underused resource is that if I know that my students are going to be studying the Gospel of Matthew, why not teach them reading strategies while we read the Gospel of Matthew? There's no
Amen.
reason that we can't, there's no reason we can't be teaching reading strategies all across the board. And I know that there are some 6 through 12 teachers who really cringe at that, because they think, but I don't know how to teach these strategies. But you do, because you're a reader. If you're a proficient reader, then you know to do a think aloud and to describe how you do your own reading. So I think that just using the entire, if you're a self-contained teacher, using the entire day as your reading time, then that can be a really great way to support readers.
Excellent. Michelle, I am so happy that we got the chance to speak this morning. I want to see if we can talk later on during the year, and we can talk about some authentic assessments in reading and maybe some performance-based ones. So I would love to have you back if you're interested.
That sounds great. Thank you.
Yes. Michelle, I wish you nothing but prayer and blessings as you continue your beautiful work in the Andrew M. Greeley Center in Loyola. And thank you for joining us today, and I hope you have a great day.
Thank you, Raul. Same to you. Have a great day.
Well, that's it for this week. If this podcast was a blessing to you, can you please head over to iTunes and subscribe and give us a review or a rating? It really does help other Catholic educators find the podcast and use it as a resource. Thanks again to the amazing people at RCL Benziger for generously sponsoring this podcast. Check out their new resource for Catholic schools, Blessed Are We, Faith in Action, which enables teachers to share the love of Christ with children who have special needs. Visit rclbenziger.com to learn more. Join me again next time as we continue to advance God's kingdom by including all of God's children in Catholic schools and faith formation. Until then, this is Dr. Raul Escarpio. Thanks for listening, and may God bless your day.